I want to bring in, again, Matt Bradley, NBC's correspondent in Tel Aviv, to talk with us about the context within which these remarks are being made. And then also, Matt, some people might have been wondering why they were being given a bit of a geography lesson there. But to me, it felt like Netanyahu was very much negotiating that ceasefire deal, or one of the sticking points around it, the Philadelphia corridor, live and in public, explaining why this is one of the things that has prevented a deal from being struck so far. What struck you first?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a man under pressure. It looked as though, Ali, like he's almost trying to convince himself, but in front of a nationwide audience who had been waiting to hear from him for the past 48 hours. I mean, I just told you just before this speech started that I wasn't expecting Benjamin Netanyahu to concede on any points. I wasn't expecting him to back down in the face of public pressure. I was still very surprised by the tone that we just heard. We saw at the very top, only about 30 seconds of conciliatory speech, talking about the lives that were lost, about the promising young souls who were murdered by Hamas in those tunnels. But then the tone switched very, very dramatically, as you saw, to bringing up something that almost felt like a non sequitur, even though it's something that we talk about all the time in Israeli media and we hear from the government, the Philadelphia corridor. And for our audience, well, if you were watching, you got a very, very good lecture on exactly what that was because he delivered it with a map. He had props. It was kind of shocking that he took that really sharp handbrake turn from talking about the lives that were lost in poignant terms and how Hamas was going to be paying a heavy price to suddenly really lecturing the Israeli public who are out in the street in I don't want to use that word lightly, unprecedented numbers, but they really do feel unprecedented, lecturing them on why he is sticking to this one particular part of this wider negotiation around freeing these hostages. He didn't even really give it much of an introduction. He didn't really explain why he was delving into the Philadelphia corridor, though everybody in the audience would certainly know. He went into history about why this wasn't new, about how he had discussed this before under previous premierships with previous political leaders. He talked about how this was giving oxygen to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, how they were allowed to smuggle weapons over the Philadelphia corridor. But at the end, his tone, and he's still talking, he's still lecturing, it is not going to placate a public who are out in the street, not just demanding that the hostages come home, but demanding that he resign.
Yeah, certainly a defiant posture from the Israeli leader, exactly as you predicted. Matt, my friend, thank you for sticking around for us and giving us that context. And joining us now, Aaron David Miller, former Arab-Israeli negotiator and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. So, Aaron, just first, your reaction to what we heard from the prime minister there. Did anything he said surprise you, or was this exactly, as Matt expected, what you thought you might hear from him in the aftermath of the last 48 hours there?
No, I think this was a dramatic presentation with props, and he's done this before on the issue of Iran and its nuclear aspirations before the UN several years ago. I think this was not necessarily a self-rationalization for supporting his position, but to reaffirm and make it unmistakably clear that Benjamin Netanyahu, despite whatever pressures occur from the Israeli public, from his own Minister of Defense, he talked about some among us have doubts. And I think it makes unmistakably clear to me that there is an absence of urgency in terms of the prime minister's timetable for signing any deal, even a phase one deal, which would result in a 6-week ceasefire, limited exchange of hostages for an asymmetrical number of Palestinian prisoners, and that he intends to remain on the Philadelphia corridor. He didn't even get to the other piece of real estate, the Netzarim corridor, which bisects Gaza east and west. So I think it's an unmistakable sort of message to the administration that if, in fact, they're considering putting a final proposal on the table, and that proposal does not address what he believes to be his security requirements with regard to the Philadelphia corridor, that there's not going to be a deal from his end. And if you combine that with yesterday's murder, willful execution, a day or so ago, Thursday, Friday is probably when it happened, of 6 hostages, including one American, by Hamas, there's an absence of urgency on both sides to getting this done. And that leaves the administration and everyone else in a sort of cul-de-sac with no easy or quick way out, I'm afraid.
That's definitely right, especially when you look at the way that President Biden spoke about this morning. And I want to talk about the U.S. role here. But first, if you could just remind us about the role of these two corridors that you bring up. And the Philadelphia corridor, of course, was the one that Netanyahu spent so much time and presentation on. I know this might seem really in the weeds and it might seem like a small detail, but this is one of the key sticking points that has consistently been hard to navigate for those who are trying to put together this ceasefire deal that would also include return of the hostages. Can you explain why there is so much focus put here by Netanyahu and by negotiators?
Well, as an objective matter, the Philadelphia corridor is important. It's roughly 14 kilometers long. It separates Egypt from Gaza, 100 meters or so wide. In 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip from the Palestinian Authority, arrangements that the Israelis, the Egyptians, and the Europeans had worked out for monitoring that particular corridor came to an end. There's no doubt it provides, as did the Rafah crossing above board, a pathway for smuggling of all kinds of contraband. And no doubt it led to the Hamas military buildup. But the reality here is that governing is about choosing. And the defense minister's position, and I think the Israeli security elites, it's not my analysis, the Israeli security elite, Shin Bet, Mossad, and the Minister of Defense, the Israeli Defense Forces, believe that you can, in effect, if you make a deal to return hostages, return to the Philadelphia corridor, or work out arrangements, including technical monitoring and building walls, both above and below ground, that would in effect stop the illicit smuggling to which the prime minister refers. So I guess, and Minister Gallant laid it out, you can have the Philadelphia corridor or you could have the hostages. And that is the central question here. It's not that Philadelphia corridor isn't important, but the question is right now, what is the priority? The Israelis can always return to their campaign, as they will, and dismantling the remainder of Hamas's brigades and its military infrastructure. But the hostages are a diminishing human asset. Every day that goes by, their situation becomes dire, as we saw in what the IDF discovered. The Nitzarim corridor bisects Gaza east and west. It was named for an Israeli settlement, Nitzarim. Yeah. Israelis want control of that corridor because they believe that they can stop or monitor the flow of armed Palestinians from southern and central Gaza, where most of the Palestinian population, having been relocated, now resides. Again, It's the judgment of security, at least not my objective assessment, that there are other means for dealing with both the Nitzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor.
Though it sounds,
again,
not to interrupt you.
Right now, based on the polls, the Israeli public, returning the hostages is the greater priority.
Yeah, and certainly, Aaron, when you think about the way that you heard it from the prime minister, it sounds like those corridors are his top priority, at least in the way that he spent the time talking about them today. And you're seeing, of course, that against the backdrop of those protests on the ground and the pressure from the Biden administration and other allies in the region. Thank you, Aaron David Miller, for the context and your deep expertise on this issue, helping us make sense of it all.